Welcome,
Okay.
Adam, to the Intersections podcast by The Connect. And the way we do it is I allow the guests to introduce themselves because nobody can introduce you better than yourself. So please take it away and tell us who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I very much appreciate you guys for having me on. It's super cool to. The internet is a beautiful place, right? You're able to connect with people all over the world, and I'm just a small town dude in the state of Kentucky over here in the U.S. who never thought I would be speaking with people completely outside of my region. So thanks for having me on. My name is Adam Martin. On social media, it is at @TAdamMartin. By trade, I am a graphic designer. So I've been a graphic designer since 2000, graduating from university in 2005. Have mostly worked in sport for that entire time, creating marketing materials, user interface, various design projects in that space. I'm probably most notably known, and I run my own studio called TA Martin Studio. That's how I feed my family. I've got 3 kids and a wife, so the design puts food on the table. But I'm most known for this side project that I started in 2014 called Makers of Sport. And so Makers of Sport is a podcast where I interview people that work in the sports industry in the creative side. So ranging from designers to creative directors, occasionally touching on entrepreneurship. I've sort of over the years kind of formed a Twitter bio that has kind of become my sort of quote unquote mission statement, which is essentially discussing design, advertising, brands, and startups in the sports industry.
That's actually
the funny part. Yeah, very, very, very wholesome. The funny part of the story, I think we connected over Twitter. If I'm not mistaken, I think the conversation was around, at the time I was working full-time at the EuroLeague basketball and the partnerships department. And, I've been into social media early on and so on. I connected with all these guys with Makers of Sports, and we kicking it in Twitter before Twitter was, aggressive, let's say. And actually, I think about at that time was the season we finished in Berlin. So the 15-16 season. So was when we rolled out the logo for the Final Four. Back then, for the listeners and viewers that don't know, the process was that the EuroLeague used to do a tender amongst creatives and agencies and independent designers. We with a set of parameters, and especially the city's inspiration played a big part. And there are many iconic Final Four logos, and since then they tend to standardize things and all. But that logo in particular caught the eye of Adam, and I think he hit me up on Twitter, and that's how we connected back then. And I'll let you, Adam, speak about that because I think it's one of your favorites.
Yes, it is. So that particular logo was obviously designed in the Bauhaus style of design, which is a very specific art period or graphic design period that you study when you go to design school. In the world of sport, we tend to, even I would venture to say now with the internet globally, we tend to sort of exist in this bubble, right? Where we all kind of look at each other's stuff. The NFL will look at the Premier League and vice versa. And so it's easy to make things look the same. So a lot of like these championship logos or Final Four logos or brand identity programs tend to sort of fit in this style of, sports design or sports branding. And you kind of have this sort of preconceived notion what that looks like, right? And then when I saw this logo, I was blown away because it tapped in. Number one, I couldn't believe that it like actually passed through the chain of command to where it doesn't look like traditional sports design, right? But it really sort of tapped into the Bauhaus time period. And as someone that went to school for graphic design and studied that world, I go very deep in both of these disciplines, right? Because design is definitely my passion. I choose to do design for a specific vertical, which is the vertical of sport, and to see kind of the very more artistic side of design come into sport, to me, it was like this beautiful moment, right? When I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. I think we may have met through, were you in the starters community? Do you remember that community years ago? It's like a sports tech thing or
probably.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't kind
yeah,
of a list. Yeah.
Yes. It was very active at the time, and then it sort of disappeared. But so I reached out and I was just like, man, this logo is amazing. And it's still today one of my favorites, because it just breaks the mold of what traditional sports design is, but it also taps, like, if you're from that region, you get it, right? Or if you are a student, you look at that and you recognize that visual style. So yeah, well done, man.
No, I mean, I was the sponsorship sales guy. So basically, if anything, I wanted to have a logo, fast, so I can, try to put a brand on it, right?
Yeah.
But it's a testament to the different periods in which the EuroLeague has evolved. I remember when I came into the EuroLeague was in then I must say 09-10 season. That Final Four was in Paris, and I remember that was, if I'm not mistaken, that probably was one of the first logos that went out to tender, and it was, it needed to be inspirational, and it was that logo was a combination of different ball shaped figures, let's say, in different colors, playing with the colors of the French flag, and making the shape of the Eiffel Tower, for example. That was, one logo. Then the very next one was inspired in Joan Miró, which is a very famous Catalan artist from Barcelona, and the Final Four was in Barcelona in 2011. So the logo took that shape of a sculpture that is in the city that he designed, and it had the pattern of the broken, ceramic pieces that is very popular across the Mediterranean, right? Mm-hmm. So it had those nuances. We went to Istanbul, and it was a logo in the shape of water, embodying water and a basketball player and so on. But the Bauhaus logo was the most sought after brief that I remember. I think around 15 agencies across Europe and design studios bid for that. And actually the discarded work, it's almost as amazing. I mean, because that was part of the brief, that it needed to be to breathe Berlin, right? Because what we were conveying at the Final Four, and it still does, is a basketball destination. And we want to put in manifest the city that is hosting the event. So all of it that it means, right?
Right.
Then it came a period in which, because of and actually this shout outs to my colleagues there that work in licensing and the partnerships, so on, because of the creative work was so, monster, let's say, it was very difficult to actually make certain assets that needed to be made in time. Yeah. So it actually worked. So for example, the basketballs, we customize the basketballs for finals. So if you get a crazy logo, then you have the guys spotting, scratching their heads saying, oh man, what can I do with this, right? And I wouldn't have it in time or whatever. So the process is kind of, and then they find a way in which they can incorporate certain nuances. I think the first one was with the final, probably Istanbul 17 or Belgrade in 18. And they incorporate kind of the local flavor, but in a frame that is pretty much standard. So it's easier for the ball production and all the other assets and so on. But definitely those were very fun times, because that actually was one of the rare opportunities that I had there, even working in partnerships and in digital content and so on, to be part of the teams that, were asked for opinion in terms of the different pitches that we received. And I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. And, it's actually, I think it also came at a pretty interesting time when it comes to social media and sports as well, right? Because it feels like within the last, 6-7 years, really about the time that I started Makers of Sport, like teams and these organizations weren't really using social media to post like score graphics and various things. And there's been kind of this shift where people, like all of these organizations, now look at themselves as a media company, right? in addition to the product that they put on the court or the field. And so it was almost like it was a beautiful design, right? Very well executed. And it also came at a time when people were discussing this stuff, right? So when I saw it, it very much appealed to me and what I was trying to do with Makers of Sport, because one of the things that Makers of Sport really is about, that I try to, if you listen to the show, it's not so much about like how people make things. I really want to elevate the discussion of design, right, in the world of sport, because historically, coming from someone like myself, my first job out of university was at a sports marketing company in the U.S., which was called, but the name was called Host Communications. College athletics, obviously really big over here. That was a college athletics marketing agency. The founder is a guy named Jim Host, who really kind of invented the NCAA sponsorship model as we see it today. That company got acquired by IMG. IMG didn't have a college sports division, so they acquired that company. It became IMG College. Now, since then, it's merged with another company called Learfield, and it's become Learfield IMG College. But anyway, my first job out of school was at this company, and you know, I was designing media guides, you know, game day programs or playbills or however you want to call them, and logos for like some matchup, you know, sponsored by AT&T, like, you know, various things like that. But in the greater graphic design industry, sports design was kind of looked down upon, right? It's like, oh, that's just a bunch of like, really almost like any entertainment design, right? It's like, sometimes there's like the whole form follows function kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes sports design is supposed to just entertain, right? Like it just has no purpose other than like, we're trying to get people to look at it and be entertained by this, right? And as someone that grew up a fan of, you know, watching movies and video games and really into those things as a child of the 90s, sports design always appealed to me, and I didn't understand why like generalist graphic design firms and sort of probably a lot of the firms that applied to your Bauhaus, right? Yeah. There's going to be a lot of more generalist design firms that speaks to. I wanted to showcase that, hey, sports designers also have a strong understanding. Most of them have a strong understanding of graphic, you know, the historical aspect of graphic design as well. I mean, if you look at my bookshelf behind me, I've got so many design books of the master design, you know, who are considered the design masters, you know, Paul Rand, Saul Bass, you know, these people that sort of historically, you know, invented corporate identity or whatever. I wanted to bring those conversations to sports design and to kind of put that out into the world, to be like, hey, like we understand too, right? Like not everything we put out is like going to be some award-winning, you know, piece that's going to be highlighted by like the global design organizations, but we do appreciate design as a craft, right? And so that really kind of this circles all the way back around into the mission of Makers of Sport. So when I saw that, it was like, I'm in, you know.
That's great. Actually, you were saying those things, like it made me think about the moment that, for instance, the Washington football team is going through in terms of their identity, formerly being known as the Redskins, and we know the whole connotations there and why they change. What's your take on them?
I think it's a great move, right? I mean, I was actually blown away that in 2020 that there was still a team called the Redskins, right? Like, to me, it just felt like there's no way you could spin that positively. I don't understand like any race, like, and then, you know, putting skin next to it, like that doesn't make any sense to me. So I think it was a positive move. I was honestly very surprised because, like, I think that the owner has been very adamant about not changing it, right? And also like seemed to put out a lot of propaganda that was, you know, people were like, oh, we're not bothered by it or whatever. But I think it's, you know, for lack of a better phrase, I guess it almost became like a perfect storm, you know, unfortunately, I guess culturally, where you had like the George Floyd stuff and then you got the COVID things. And then now the players are like, we are without a doubt going to speak on issues no matter what people think, and almost like kind of in a way, like they sort of grabbed the power back. What was very interesting to see what happened in the NCAA, right? With some of these college football programs that were like, we're not going to do anything, right? Yeah, whereas like the old, like the historical view of things or like the old school way of like a coach would be like, I don't care what you guys say. Like, I'm the coach. Everybody listens to me, believes in what I say or whatever. And we're not going to discuss it.
That doesn't play anymore.
Yeah, it's not in play at all, right? Like the athletes have the power. And especially with the name and likeness stuff, right? With that's coming in the NCAA here in the US, it's obviously a big deal. And I'm a huge advocate of that as well. I think that it's probably hard because of some of the laws here with Title IX. Like it's hard. You can't necessarily give the athletes a salary from their, just because like of like you've got the various sports and how are you going to break it up and who gets what based on revenue and those types of things. But I have always believed that if an athlete is able to go to like the local mall, right, and sell their autograph, they should be able to do that in college. Like to me, it doesn't make any sense why they couldn't do that, right? There was a guy years ago who was a kicker at UCF, University of Central Florida, and he started a YouTube channel, and it was kind of like, you know, what we see that's real popular on Instagram right now, like these little short, you know, skits basically of football-based skits, and it was funny, it was comical. And he was getting a lot of viewers, and the NCAA came in and was like, you can't do that anymore. They were going to revoke his scholarship, and he just decided, look, this to me is more important to my future than the scholarship, right? Because I'm building an audience. He had an audience at the time.
I can live off out of this if I don't play anymore,
he was like, I'm done, man. I'm a content creator now, right? So, so he moved into that.
The whole ordeal, I mean, is so nonsensical. I mean, now that we see it, it has been for ages there like that. But it's a matter of fairness, because the reality is that not all of those guys make it big when they go out of college.
Yeah, there are many.
They go busted in college.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think even some of the I'm a big college, because I grew up and live in Kentucky. Obviously, we have the Kentucky Wildcats and Coach John Calipari.
We know him in the Dominican.
Oh yeah. As a college athletics fan, it's so big over here. It's almost hard for people that aren't from here to comprehend how big it is and like the money that it makes and all these things. But I think that probably some of the most famous college athletics, whether it be football or basketball, some of the most famous college players don't seem to not pan out in the NBA or the NFL, right? I mean, I think that they were saying, I think I saw somewhere that when Tim Tebow was at the University of Florida, like he had one of the top selling jerseys of like all time, right? He obviously went to the NFL, kind of floated around, didn't really pan out as a quarterback in the NFL. I'd say he's probably doing pretty well for himself on the SEC network, but you know, like
he should quit those baseball dreams as well.
Yes, yeah. He's still chasing that, I think.
I think he's in the minor league system of the Mets still, right? Or did he move somewhere?
Is he still? Is he still? I haven't kept up.
I don't know.
Too much.
I have no idea. He's not in the New York Post stuff.
He did the last spring training, and I'm not sure if he managed. I think he started spring training this year.
Yeah, I think so
too.
The
whole thing, you kind of blow up COVID and all that. But I think that he tried to make the team. I mean, I don't know at this time, but he got that contract, not too long ago. I think that I think he's more or less already settled that he's a media personality. Yeah.
And trying to bring it back a little bit more on design and understanding this whole, sports, you related to a mascot and so on, and that's why it connects us to the topic of the Washington football team now. And I was today actually just going on Twitter, and I went into the Washington football account, and I quite liked it. I was like, this looks super nice and professional and clean. Maybe all teams should just like drop their mascots and
it's
create like this simple.
It's almost like what they call at if you. I'm a soccer fan. Obviously, using the word football over here, most people think that you are referring to American football. So I generally try to call it like when I refer to it to people that aren't in the U.S. Like I'll generally say global football. It kind of is going, and that's what Nike calls it too. If you work at Nike, you work on like the global
global football.
But it kind of was going in that direction a little bit, right? Because it was just like the city and then Washington football team, you know, and they probably could have even went like Washington Football Club, right? Because that's what's funny is a lot of the if you look at the actual corporation, you know, it'll be like I did some work with the Kansas City Chiefs, and when you get paid, it says Kansas City Football Club, right? Which is kind of funny because it sort of like has that connotation of like FC, as in like
of an athletic or grassroots club, right?
Right.
Small club.
Right.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring it up is because, for instance, like I give this a lot of thought too, which is my favorite team in basketball is the Lakers, right? Mm-hmm. But then if you know the story of the Lakers, they started in Minnesota. That's why they are the Lakers. But then they moved to LA. There's not many lakes in LA, and they're still out of the Lakers. So, but obviously now, you know, it's cemented in everybody's brains that, you know, the Lakers are from LA. But like when you really think about it, if you were looking for originality and these things, I'm like, it doesn't really go. Like if I really think about it, it doesn't really go.
Yeah,
and maybe
it should
be something else.
It doesn't, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know where like the actual invention of mascots came from. I know it's like it's obviously a very American thing, right? You have like even our MLS teams, right, will be the Seattle Sounders or, you know, whatever. They're kind of changing a little bit because I'm about an hour from FC Cincinnati, and they obviously don't have a nickname. It's just FC Cincinnati. But you know, the only thing I can think is maybe it's came from college athletics, and maybe that sort of carried over into the pros at some point. And then obviously advertising. I remember growing up and there was an era where every brand had to have a mascot, right? Like you know, Mr. Clean or
Pillsbury Doughboy.
Exactly.
Gecko.
Yeah.
Gecko.
The California Raisins. That was a hot one growing up with the singers. So yeah, and for whatever reason, it's like we're drawn to these cartoony type things that represent brands or teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's funny because connecting to the European landscape, as you say, is the sense of belonging. And mind you that, especially in basketball, because I think it's a cultural thing. You see when you go to any EuroLeague arena, some teams, they have mascots as well as an entertainment factor.
Right.
Not that they named themselves out of that. And that produces certain, you know, crazy situations. I mean, my good friends here in Valencia, their mascot is called Pam, which is the translation of boom, because it's a firecracker.
Okay. Yeah.
That's fine, yes.
And so it's like just because the connection with Valencia, they're big into, you know, fireworks and that culture, and you know, but you know, it's kind of funny. But in the end, I think that, and going into the structure and how you brand a team, and that was a process that the marketing department at EuroLeague did very well, which was obliging the teams and as a league to have as last name of whatever name you have, your city.
Yeah.
Because the power of the city, especially big capitals, carries weight here in Spain. So you have Fenerbahce, whatever sponsor, because you can sponsor the names. That's also something that is very European compared to the American. So you might eventually have actually you had an FC Barcelona, Lasa, because of Lasa Tires, was a sponsor basketball team.
Yeah.
So, but you have the city name within the name, and that's the important part. And that created an atmosphere of real continental competition. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see when you see Real Madrid versus Bayern Munich, or Alba Berlin, or so on.
Right.
So, yeah, it's. I think it's something that, to Luis' point, not as much as seeing a trend going, because of what you say in terms of there are names that are already, you know, ingrained in people's minds, and if you don't want to cause any upheaval on that as well, you better leave those names alone.
Right.
But yeah, the Washington football team, sounds good. And if they decide to go to club, they could have a soccer team or whatever other team, because that's the concept of club here in Spain.
Right.
That's why they are called football clubs or clubs of football, because they used to have, most of them, and some still have, multiple disciplines within that. So FC Barcelona is Football Club Barcelona, and they have a soccer team, a basketball team, a handball team, a roller hockey team, and a futsal team.
Yeah.
And they even had baseball before back in the day.
Yeah. See, I really like that model, honestly, because to me it makes the brand so much bigger, right? And also more people tend to associate with it. Like, you know, if you're wearing like an FCB, you know, like basketball uniform, you also associate with the soccer team, right? Whereas in the US, like it's very siloed, right? You have like the NBA and the team owners of the NBA, and you have the team owners of like the MLS. And one thing, you know, that's kind of weird over here is that, and I'm no like business guru, but it feels like that the like European model is like for sports and professional sports is almost even more like capitalist than like the US, because in the US it's
they're
like
just poorer in management. That's the reality.
It's just a very closed model, right? Where it's like not anybody can just like spawn up a club and then you can climb through the ranks and be promoted and relegated and those types of things over here, right? Like you already have to have a lot of money to go in and like purchase a team. And that's why I love about, especially, you know, soccer in Europe is the promotion relegation, and how in those cities, you know, like it means so much when you promote, and it means like jobs for the city and like just so many various things. It's like people are so much more invested, it feels like, whereas here, and it feels like they're invested very regionally, and you can really kind of get behind your local club, right? Whereas in the US, because the television model and all these things, you'll just be living in, you know, where I'm at in Kentucky, and then I'll just be like, you know, I'm a fan of the Las Vegas Raiders, so that's my new team, right? And you just like pick that team, and and those
you'll have a hard time.
yeah. But you know, I think with my specific situation, we don't have a professional team in our state, right? So like Kentucky, a lot of people from here, depending on which part of the state you're from, geographically, like I can drive to I think I'm within 5 hours of like 8 different pro teams, whether it's Indianapolis, you know, Cincinnati, Charlotte, Atlanta, Nashville, Tennessee. So generally people around here will, if you're closer to Nashville, you'll be like a Tennessee Titans fan. If you're closer to Cincinnati, you'll be a Cincinnati Reds and Bengals fan. But there was a time prior to these massive television deals that I know like the Cincinnati Reds would go on this trip and they would just drive their bus down through like these towns, right? And that's
the caravan.
And they develop their fans that way, which is quite interesting. But yeah, sport is all of this just is what makes sport so interesting to me, you know? It's just like
now it's all about the DMA, man. So everything goes to a centimeter or inch in each city, in each county, right? So it's funny because actually the guys have a lot of fun questions and things that they want to cover in terms of design, logos, mascots, and so on. But your comment before in terms of form and function kept ringing, because when you see design also not only as some manifestation of graphical art, but as a way you run a structure, a company, or whatever, you kind of find things. And in my area in sports, you see that. And looking at this last comment in terms of how the model in Europe is different than the US in terms of management. It's even different from country to country. So you have, you know, certain ownership restrictions that you have in Germany compared to the rest of Europe, in terms of the teams in Germany are for the people. So you cannot have one single owner or one corporate partner and so on. There are carve-outs and workarounds. And in terms of that reflection of form and function is RB Leipzig, one of the latest examples, which is owned by Red Bull.
Right.
Technically, in reality, it's owned by a group of fans, which they all respond to Red Bull. But
don't get me started on Leipzig. As I live in Germany, they are not a popular team here. So.
No, they aren't. But it's a very shrewd business decision, because what they did is that they bought the controlling rights of a 5th division club, and it turns out that Leipzig sits 250 kilometers away, a round way, from their closest professional soccer team at the Bundesliga level. And they decided to have that team first for that, because they don't have any real competition in terms of market share. Back in the day, East Germany and West Germany was something, and Leipzig is in East Germany, and that's how they saw that, to bring a powerhouse up from East Germany and have that competition, especially with the Bavarian clubs, right? And they're hated because it's going against the grain in terms of the tradition, let's say. Mm-hmm. But you have other curious ideas, like FC Bayern is of their supporters, and some private owners that are also sponsors. So Audi, Adidas, and Allianz are also shareholders of that team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's something that is very unique. You don't see corporate brands in the US being part of ownership groups outright,
right?
And in a very commercial way.
Yeah,
I was just saying that Munich is an exception to this, but the other clubs that have ownership, like Bayer, Hoffenheim, Wolfsburg, are, when it comes to fans, they're not welcome. They're supported by probably more external. They're mostly from people outside Germany, and they're from within. But it is an interesting one. It's all the time. There's a big debate about which stadium do you go to if you want to get a proper fan experience. And I live about 30 kilometers from Leverkusen. Nobody wants to go to those games. Everybody wants to go see Mönchengladbach or Dortmund. And this is a massive, massive difference than in UK, for example, because they just don't like intervention of companies, even if they do good, like Leipzig did this year. It wasn't greeted with joy in Germany when it comes to success.
Yeah.
All right.
The romanticism of the game. Yeah.
I'm gonna bring it back a bit more on the design part. And since we've been talking about Europe sports, I want to know, Adam, what is your favorite sports brand identity? Let's call it.
Ooh.
Both in the US or the top in both places.
Yeah. Oh man, I look at a lot of these. I think that probably one of my favorite in college athletics in the US would probably be the University of Texas, just because it's like this simple Longhorn, right, look, and it's very symmetrical, and symmetry just tends to appeal to me subjectively. In the in professional sports, I don't know that this is necessarily like, I would say this is like the best logo in sports, but one that just sticks out to me just because as a kid of the 90s is like the Chicago Bull, right? Because I just remember seeing that stamped on everything, right? Michael Jordan got famous, Scottie Pippen, The Last Dance. I'm sure everybody watched it here.
The walking crap. Upside down.
Yeah. There's an interesting story about that logo too that I was reading, where a guy designed it and got like season tickets or something, and then later he went back to try to get like when it became famous, to try to get some more money from it or something. I think he ended up passing away, and his daughter's trying to help him really just become known as the designer for it more than anything now, because the money obviously doesn't mean anything. But an identity that I think when it first came out that a lot of people did not like, that I did like, was when Juventus did their rebranding, and they just went with like the J and like incorporated the simple stripes and whatnot. A lot of people did not like that. I did like it because I thought it was very simple, and I thought that I like identities. I'm very interested to see sports identities move into like a more flexible identity system going forward. Because I think sports, especially like in the US, sports very much still tends to think in primary mark, secondary mark, word mark, right, letter mark or whatever. And with the way that digital is, right, I mean, these things can be moving, right? Like your primary logo can just be an actual like motion piece, in my opinion, right, moving forward. So I am interested to see sport adopt that. And also, if you think about brand identities today, even in the corporate world, a logo doesn't do as much as it used to do, right? Like at one point in time, it was the face of the brand, but now, like, again, like the way that these brands are expanding in digital media, and then in like outdoor media, you have to have this entire identity, visual identity, right? Where like, you know, I need to be able to look at this stuff without the logo and recognize this as a part of your brand, right?
Yeah. You know, the Nike orange box, which wasn't,
yeah,
you know, that's the story. You wanted to pop out in a store full of boxes that pretty much look the same. So it's not about the swoosh, which evidently is distinguishable, but the orange box has weight and represents the brand as well.
And the you know, the 3 stripes, right? Like 3 stripe life with Adidas, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what the stripes look like or how they're executed, as long as there are 3 stripes, you're going to associate that with that brand.
That's a quite funny story when you talk about the 3 stripes, because my wife, she works in Esprit, which was an iconic brand in California in the 80s. Now they're doldrums, I would say, but they wanted to do a simple like all over logo on their sweatshirt where they had the E on the shoulders, but the E is 3 stripes, and somebody from Adidas called and was like, no, that's not possible, guys. It's 3 stripes, even though it's E. And that's what you're saying. Like they even have that protected. It's quite astonishing.
Yeah.
Those consumer brands, for me, like one that since it came out and the first time I saw it, I remember seeing it in this movie, Any Given Sunday. So Under Armour. So for me, it's because it's so simple. It's just the U and the A and right inverted. It's like it's very, very simple logo, but at the same time, it has that really cool effect, right? So
yeah. It's also symmetrical, right? And so like to me, like symmetrical logos, I love them. They're beautiful. But at the same time, I do think Under Armour logos look a little weird on like the side of a shoe, because you're so used to seeing something that has like this movement, like the Nike, and you can flip it the other way and the other side has Nike. Whereas in Under Armour, it's just like a more like a symmetrical look. A consumer brand that really kind of mixes it up with their logo is New Balance. Right? Like sometimes you'll see like the more block N, and then sometimes you'll see like the really thin one on like the more like trail running shoes and those types of things.
I think they distinguish that between performance and lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to what Adidas then did, basically compiling all the historical logos and making a system out of that. So you have originals, you have performance, you have, you know, apparel, then you have the collabs things. Yeah. But it's very
interesting. I don't know if you all have read this book or seen this book. I'm in the middle of it, but it's called Sneaker Wars.
Oh yeah, I read that twice. Yeah. It's one of my go-to books.
Yeah. It's a good one. You know, when I was growing up, soccer was my first sport that I ever played, so it became my first love. Living in the state of Kentucky, basketball eventually, you know, everybody captures that sport here. You just have to, right? Like you're
blue or you're red, but you're something.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Louisville Cardinals. Yeah. So I remember growing up playing soccer, and it's interesting how we associate brands with certain sports or with certain things. And I remember like for us, if you in basketball, I was like all Nike. Like if you're not wearing Nike basketball sneakers, whether it's Jordans or whatever, like you're not a real baller or whatever, right? But
you don't play well.
Yeah, but it was a polar opposite in soccer for me in like the 90s, right? So for me, it was like when you're playing soccer, if you're not wearing Adidas, you don't know what you're doing, right? Like you're a poser. And our coach would call it out, right?
Yeah. Because in terms of marketing and brand marketing, I think that's how the new sneaker wars have played out. In terms that, I mean, you gotta strike some luck sometimes, and when you have Michael Jordan and you make his mother convince him on signing with you, I mean, and then he does what he did, it's all over. I mean, you are basketball,
right?
And from then on, it's about continue to expand it, build it, solidifying it, and I think that I have good relationships with everyone in the different brands. But what I think that has happened with Adidas in basketball is that they haven't found a way, and not because of the lack of talent, they haven't found a way to translate their dominance in soccer to basketball. because those are the two global sports, right?
Right.
If you are in the space, you need to capture some sizable market share in both to be profitable, right? And that problem, which I think I mean honestly, I discussed this at length with partners, with friends, and so on in the brands and outside of those brands, and no one has kind of a real explanation. And I think now they are redefining how they will continue around. So they are the soccer brand, although Nike did a great job in translating into that, and it's probably easier. It wasn't an easy job for sure, but it's easier if you are a contender brand, especially when in the 90s, right? If you're a contender brand that you want to disrupt the scene and capture as much as you can, than being the tenure brand and be able to maintain the legacy and the heritage and try to continue to grow. And that's what Nike did best. I mean, Nike went all pop stars with soccer in the 90s, and that's how they did it. And they got lucky again. Brazil dominated. Go figure.
You see, right? you know what's quite funny, because in Bosnia in the 90s, it was the flip side, just by some sort of circumstance, because Nike was the football brand because of Ronaldo. Everybody was trying to get the R9 cleats. They had those nice waves. And Adidas was the basketball brand. Maybe that was just like sheer availability of sneakers, but like Kobe's, the Crazy 8s, those were the most worn sneakers. But then, it's because of the economic situation. Jordans and Nikes were just too expensive, and nobody wanted to import them. So I grew up playing basketball in Adidas until I moved to the States. And then I was like, well, it's all Jordan for now. But before that, it was Adidas.
Well, and I think Adidas did have a moment in basketball, like you mentioned the Kobe's, right? Like when Kobe was with them, and then they had the Tracy McGrady's. They had some really interesting design.
They have momentum there,
sure.
I think the biggest blow, and I think that was pure bad luck, especially for the player. But when Adidas signed D-Rose, that was the second coming of the best basketball you ever saw, and that was the chance. I mean, they bet the house on that one, and it didn't pan out. And now they have James and they have other players, and it's not the same. But but it's bad luck, and then sometimes you strike good luck, like when they did with Run DMC, My Adidas, boom, dominated the 80s,
right?
Or or Jordan with Nike, and then the opposite can happen.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that footwear has become such it's almost more lifestyle now than it is performance in a way, right? Because I remember when growing up, if you're wearing Jordans, like people that wore Jordans still were hoopers or whatever. Right? And like now, like people are like just video game, like esports players or whatever, like wearing Jordan.
Yeah. I wanted to say, because somewhere I read that you're a sneakerhead.
Yeah, I would call myself a recovering sneakerhead. Yeah. I have 3 kids now, so
maybe that's the trick.
Where I was going.
You buy a lot of sneakers, but just not for you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
How many pairs?
Oh, I think right now probably only have, and I say only, I mean, it depends on where you are in the context of sneakerhead, obviously. I'd say I probably have like 30 or 40 pairs of sneakers right now. And some of them I wear more than others.
What's the rotation? What's the rotation of those sneakers?
Man. Funny enough, right now, I'm kind of getting into a phase where I'm starting to become like, I'm getting older and I'm becoming like the old dad that's like, I just want something comfortable, right? So I'm actually wearing like more like slip-on things, right? Like, slip-on Vans or like whatever. I would say probably the ones that I wear the most, like when I want to show some things off, like if I was going to a conference, I'm going to definitely put these in there. Like I definitely put like the Neymar Air Jordan 5s. Right when they did that,
and now that's a relic.
I know, man. I know for sure.
You wanna know a story? I was, as of like a few weeks ago, my old pair of indoor sneaker shoes, they broke. because I bought last ones like 8 years ago. So guess what I did? I bought the Jordan Neymar's football shoes, and I think I bought them from Spain. They were like 70 euros, and I went on StockX, and they're like 500. And I went, whoa!
Wow.
I just played in them, so they're not dead stock. But I was like, wow, that is now a real relic. It's like,
just call them
not
game
happening
worn,
again.
man. They're game worn.
Oh yeah, they're game worn. 40.
Actually,
Yeah,
I do have something cool. I'll slide back here and get it. So these are some game worn cleats from Matt Carpenter.
Yeah.
So he went to Texas Christian University, and they're known as the Horned Frogs. We were talking about like nicknames and whatnot. So there's actually like these little, I don't know if you can see them or not, but like these little shiny frogs on here, and then they call him Carp. And so Carp 13 actually designed his logo. So he came to play Cincinnati and gave me a pair of these.
Wow. So I'll ask the question then. I'll ask the question because I know Lou was alluding in there. So you like sneakers, you love design. Have you designed any kind of, have you thought about customizing or anything in that direction?
Yes, I did. I mean, like not, officially. I mean, I've gone on like the Nike Air Max website and done like little custom things. And I put like, I designed some Air Maxes a few years ago, and I put like hashtag BBN on the back. So like BBN is the common on social media known as Big Blue Nation. That's like the Kentucky phrase, right? So other than that, but honestly, sneakers are really what got me into graphic design in the first place. I was exposed to basketball, loved basketball. I got my first issue of Slam magazine when I was in 6th grade, and it was like issue number 3, and it was interesting because I remember, in school, we were learning how to write, but Slam was written in kind of like sort of a hip hop voice. And so I remember like this conflicting feeling of like, this is cool the way that they're writing here, but why are you all teaching me to write like this
properly?
Yeah. So that magazine exposed me to so much, man. And I think at one point in time they did either a Kicks issue or something. And then, that's a good one. I'm actually right now at this moment, I'm actually designing a couple spreads for Slam. I'm working with their art director right now, designing I got like two spreads that I'm designing for an issue that they're going to be releasing soon that I think a lot of people that grew up in the 90s will probably love. But
I'll buy those and make them cheap, like I'll do the rest.
So Slam exposed me to the profession of industrial design, right? And so they interviewed a guy who was a sneaker designer. And to me, it was like, whoa, wait, this is a job? You can design sneakers? This is so crazy. When I went to school, I went to university fairly close, to where I was from, because in university is very expensive in the U.S., right? So a lot of like smaller schools you can go to in your state, and it's like cheaper to go there because of state funding or whatnot. But when I went to school, like in my head, I was like, I started my major and my focus in art, right? I didn't know what graphic design was yet at the time. I knew, I knew what logos were and those types of things, but I didn't understand there was a profession that did that type of stuff. I went into school and I thought I want to design sneakers, but in Kentucky, there was not going to be a sneaker design. There was no Pensole Academy, right? Like if you're familiar with Pensole Academy now. So my first week in school, I met a baseball player there, and he had said, I wanted to go into industrial design too, and they didn't have it here when I chose to come to this school, but they had this thing called graphic design. And I was like, interesting. It has the word design, so wonder how different it can be, right? So then, I went and looked it up, and at that time too, if you remember the And One mixtapes, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Which was, that was, you talk about like a challenger brand that kind of like went in and got a little popular.
They go sizable market share there and share of voice. Yeah.
And so if you remember, those mixtapes had these illustrations on the covers, and I was looking at that, and so that kind of exposed me to that, and I was like, I really want to do that kind of stuff. When I was in college, funny enough, we had to do a project where we had to design a magazine spread, and I chose Slam. So it's kind of crazy that like I chose Slam magazine to design as a project, and now I'm actually designing real spreads in the magazine, 14, 15 years later. So yeah,
That's
sneakers
amazing.
exposed me to that, but I love sneakers. I love sneaker culture. It's so much bigger now than it, you know, when I was growing up, like you had to go to the mall, right? And you had to get there real early and wait in line. And it was hard. And I'm a size 13. So size 13s go like super,
Yeah.
super quick.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, we too as well. We are 13, and
Yeah.
we get L's by the pound.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know. I got small feet, only 11 and a half compared to you guys. So
I think 11s are another size. It's like really popular. It goes quick.
I think everything
Yeah,
above
so-
9, it's tough to come by.
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I definitely credit sneakers and a love of sneakers to me becoming a graphic designer in a roundabout way.
Right. So I'm gonna then ask the other question. I had a different question prepared, but I'm gonna pivot a little bit. Best design sneakers ever, and I want the name, not just Air Max. This one, since we're all big sneakerheads here, and we're like,
Yeah.
I say I have 40 pairs and growing, and probably when I have kids, it's gonna be down. But yeah, we're pretty crazy in that aspect. So
Yeah.
best design sneakers, and then
Best
all of us.
Like, is this? Are you meaning like as far as like comfort and everything, or just the look? I think I'm going to surprise you with my answer. I'm going to surprise you.
Okay, all right.
I love the Adidas Sambas. To me, they're like just a classic, and they can go with just about anything, right? Like it depends on like how you want to dress, right? So to me, they're just a classic, right? And it was something that when I was in 6th grade, like it stuck out to me, and everybody was getting them, and Santa Claus didn't bring mine, and it's another one of those things when you become an adult and you're like, I'm gonna go snatch those up. So I do love the Sambas.
Nice. Rayde?
I mean, there's a little backstory. Back in the day, I mean, you had 2 pairs of sneakers a year at best. So and we played basketball, so we had to make one of those, the playing shoes. So and we used, basketball oriented shoes, so Flight, Zooms, or whatever it came that year. I mean, that was the thing. And also I remember that we had to ask our uncles or aunts or cousins in the States to actually buy that for us and ship it back to the Dominican, because you couldn't find anything above 11 there in the country at the time, right? So, and I always was fond of sneakers, couldn't afford it, and now in my adult life I can. My wife doesn't let me, so that's another part of the story. But every now and then, everything that is New Balance 997 or that series or Air Jordan 1s has my attention. If we're talking a specific pair that I will probably pay whatever it is to get it, even if it costs my divorce, is probably the Air Jordan 1 Union pair of a couple of years ago.
Okay.
That's
nice
for me, that's the perfect combination of art and the shape and the form of the shoe that you could, you wear with everything. That's my shoe.
All right. Lou?
Well, since we're giving background here, I'm the second. So Rayde obviously is older than me. I'm the second one in our family. So pretty much whatever my big brother did, I wanted to do. Hence, that's why I got into basketball. My love for dressing well and all that. If he would have led up to me, I would wear sweatpants and just t-shirts all the time. But my brother didn't let me, so I grew up. But that said, I think my favorite sneaker of all. Okay, design-wise, yes, it's definitely the AJ ones, and I have a couple of pairs on the bread colorway. I think I just naturally it was very aspirational, coming from the Dominican and trying to to get the Jordans and all that. So for me, it was a big moment when I was able to afford to pay to buy myself some Jordans, and then now I have a few in my closet, and that's pretty cool. But in terms of design, comfort, the whole thing, I think the Nike Free Runs which is a very simple shoe, but at the same time, it's just super comfortable and so sleek. Sleek is the word, right? So the way they just look, it's just really cool. And I wear those pretty much every day. And I also have a few pairs of those. So Nike Free Runs,
Okay.
yeah, especially.
All right. All right. Comfort wise, anything that has boost on it, that's for me. If I wear on comfortable shoes, I just get some boost and I'm good to go. Like best design for me, Jordan 12s. And there is a story. I had much like you guys have Slam magazine. There was the Croatian version of it, and you would get in the centerfold, you'd kind of get a full-size poster, and there was this full-size poster of MJ, and he wore the black and red Jordan 12s, and I fell in love with them. Unfortunately, you can't really wear them with anything that's not baggy, so I don't really have them, but those are the ones
that's what they were
love.
worn with back then, for sure.
Yeah. So I don't actually own them, but to go kind of with Rayde, if I had to, the ultimate grail for me, and it's not because it's a kind of a trendy thing, but there's a pair of sneakers, it's the Nike SB lows, but they are Pete Mondrian version. So it's like a artsy one, and I think only a few were made, but that's almost impossible to find. But that would be the one I'd be like, yo, wife, leave me alone. I'm getting that. So it's a bit of all three.
As far as like ones that I really wanted that I've never gotten, it would be the Air Jordan 11 Cool Grays. Like I've never been able to get my hands on a size 13 of those. Yeah. And so those are ones I remember those came out when I was in high school, and I wanted them then. I still want them now, and now I'm not so much. There's so much sneaker news, man. Right? Like used to be. There's news every day, right? And there's a kid who came on my show very early on who was a sneaker designer for Reebok, and we were discussing this, and I was like, man, I need you to just come on and like once a week and just tell me what the news is, because I can't even keep up, right? Because I'm like trying to watch like so many different things in sports marketing and all these things, and it's just a very fascinating industry. My next guest is actually going to be the founder of Nice Kicks.
So, man.
Oh yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
Must hear, that's for sure.
Yeah, a lot of followers, right? And kind of one of the first people in that world covering just sneaker news. Just the fact that there are websites that have millions of followers that covering sneaker news.
Imagine back in the day, the online publishing world was updated weekly.
Yeah.
Now it's every minute there's an update on or a leak or whatever in sneakers only.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to apparel or collabs or whatever, I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
And to think that only back in the day it was only Sneaker Freaker. Now you have all these Nice Kicks. You have
those are the Aussie ones, right?
Right?
Woody is out of Melbourne. They operate.
Right after them, wasn't it like Soul Collector came out? At
yeah.
And Adam, what's your take on, like, for instance, this affects the sign, of course, and all this move to sustainability? And did you see that? I actually just copped the Jordan Craters, which is the first Jordan that comes out. Yeah, I'm using the lingo here. I'm using the lingo here.
Yeah.
They were not the cop, but.
I mean, to me, it makes sense, right? I mean, I don't know why you would pursue any type of design project now that's not focusing on sustainability, given like what we know, right? I don't. It's interesting though to see like some of the solutions that are being made. I don't know that I've seen anything that's like sort of made me like blown away, right? And at least off the top of my head. From what, man, I'm like, this is an aside, but I just noticed this. So like if you look at the Jordan 11 logo, the 23 on the back, it kind of like subconsciously, as I look at this, inspired my Makers of Sport logo. Like it wasn't deliberate at all. But now that I look at this, I'm like, whoa, this is.
Yeah, it has a 23 vibe in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like this definitely subconsciously inspired me, which is like one of the interesting things about design, right? Like when you consume so much and read so much, like sometimes you'll create something and you'll be like, I feel like I've seen this before, but I don't know where I would reference.
Actually, that's why there are people that say that actually really in design or creative work, there's nothing that is 100% original, because you are actually, if you are in the space or within the culture, you receive those inputs, and that's how the brain works.
Yeah.
So it's always, let's say, an enhancement on, to fit into what's next. And now that we're veering towards the last stretch and talking about sustainability, I remember that one business book that actually impacted me a lot in these past few years that I read was David Butler's Design to Grow, in which he was explaining from a designer's perspective how that affects businesses, right? And how you, from the logo or the system or the image, the brand system, you can actually be able to soften the process and make it more nimble and try to define it. And the way he saw it is that for big companies is the search to be agile and nimble and adapt to current situations, and for small companies is to be able to scale, right? And looking at how especially talking about sneakers and how that correlates to sustainability, I think it's not just on the materials. I mean, we are working on a project. That's the root of this whole podcast project, that was intended, or still is intended, into that space in terms of how to look at it from a sustainability perspective without detracting from the cultural force that it is, in terms of looking fresh and having the sneakers that you like and having it the way that you like it, right? And I see something that I think it was timid at first from Nike, and then now On Running, I don't know if you follow, the brand, which is a Swiss running shoe company that now is endorsed, and his minority shareholder Roger Federer is their partner. They launched a subscription-based sneaker service, basically. So what they did is that they create the product is really good and is really made for performance. And there are Olympic athletes that compete in those shoes. And what they did is that they created a shoe that you can only get by subscription. And every 400 kilometers, they exchange a pair. And the shoe itself is completely compostable and recyclable.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's, I mean, you cannot buy it and it's yours. So it's a leasing of a shoe,
right,
essentially, right? So I think that the industry is looking at that. They focus on materials because I think that that's the more pressing issue, processes and materials. But I think that acquisition and the way people interact with the product is as important as that. And I think Nike launched for the US only, at least and for the time being, a subscription base for children, in which you can, especially because, at certain ages, they just, outgrow pairs like crazy. And I think that, that could be applied to the lifestyle event part of it. I mean, there are shoes that you want to have and to keep. There are shoes that you want to flip, but there are shoes that once you wore them a few times, it's done. So, so what do you do with, with a storage facility with 500 pairs or more?
Right. Well, and I've posted recently about the Reebok model too, where they're sort of crowdsourcing the beginning of the sneakers, right? And I got in on that first pair mostly as just I just wanted to be in on it as like a quote unquote historic moment, right? Or something like that, just to be like, yeah, I got in on these. But yeah, like business models are interesting to me and how they are changing. Because here's the thing, like, and I think this sort of like speaks to brands and like how they make us feel, because, at the end of the day, sneakers are really just a commodity, right? Like, I mean, and there was even, I think there's this old clip of Steve Jobs with Apple years ago, and he references Nike and he says, Nike sells a commodity. Like their actual product is a commodity, but they're not, that's not actually like what they're selling. They're selling a feeling, right? Or like this brand and how it makes you feel. And do you identify with this brand and these
types he probably did that wearing New Balances.
Oh yeah. I'm sure he was wearing those New Balances that he always wore and his black turtleneck. But, like to me, and I think maybe subconsciously too, this also led me into being a designer, because I always recognize brands and there's actually, it's been interesting to have kids because I actually watch how they engage with brands too. And I remember a very specific moment when my older son was like, somewhere 18 months, somewhere between 1 and 2, right? And the cereal brand Cheerios, right? So Cheerios has like the yellow, it's the hardcore like yellow with like the bowl. The box would have a bowl of Cheerios on the cover. Well, we had one of those, little cabinets. I don't know what you call them, but it's like a little rolly cabinet in the corner of your house that we would put the snacks in. There was a box of Cheerios, and in front of the box of Cheerios was like a knockoff version of Cheerios, like the Walmart version or whatever, right? But there was a picture on the box. The box was white and had red or whatever other additional colors it used. There was a picture of a box of something that looks like Cheerios. But my son would move that box out of the way to get to the actual box of the real brand Cheerios, because to him, he associated Cheerios with the color yellow. Right. And so it's a very fascinating moment to see how even just at that age that it sort of, speaks to people, that brand does.
And it goes to the whole system. No, now it's audio is a big thing. So it's not just producing content, but having an audio identity and all that. Yep. So no, it's great. So Adam, actually, I think that even we've run over the time that we told you we'll hold you here, and we don't want to overextend the.
It's all good, man. Hey, when you interview a podcaster, expect long talks.
No, but especially, I mean, I think, and this is a common thread. It's a topic that actually we feel passionate about. So the way we face this is within the industry, the sports business industry. There are so many layers that actually play a part in it, and I wanted to have this season 2 to have a voice, which, to your point at the beginning, usually design is looked down on, right, in terms of the role that it plays, and as we've seen here, although I think that we just barely scratched the surface, design is an integral part of how brands or experiences make you feel, how products actually entice you to buy them, and basically in terms of actual professional sports or college sports or whatever, is how you interact, is that interface with fans. Everything has a design purpose in, and we are really, really thankful for you to lend your knowledge and your time for this episode with us, and we'll keep talking shop on the record and through the DMs for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I very much appreciate it, guys. It's been a pleasure, and definitely we'll stay in touch and chat online.
Excellent.
All right.
Please.
Cheers.
See you guys.
This episode is brought to you, as always, by The Connect. The Connect is Rayde Luis Baez. Follow the Intersection podcast in your favorite podcasting platform. Leave us a review and share it with a friend. This will really help us be found by more of you interested in the topics of sports marketing and deal making. Until the next one.